Mommy, why is my chair beside the trash?
Because you don't belong at our table. Enjoy the party. Before the cake is cut, you'll lose this mansion.
The day my family seated my 7-year-old daughter beside the garbage, they believed they were humiliating a tired nurse who had married badly, worked too much, and owned nothing they respected. They did not know I had spent 6 months tracing money they had stolen from sick children. They did not know the old woman they treated like a confused patient had been watching every move they made. And they did not know that before the birthday cake was cut, the mansion, the trust, and the future they expected to inherit would be taken out of their hands. My name is Elena Callahan. I am an emergency room nurse in Maryland, a single mother, and the granddaughter Margaret Whitmore's family preferred to forget. By sunset, they remembered me. It started the previous winter, when my grandmother collapsed during a charity dinner at the Whitmore estate. The Whitmores had built their fortune through commercial real estate, medical investments, and a chain of private rehabilitation centers. Their name appeared on hospital wings, museum walls, and scholarship brochures. At public events, my relatives spoke about service, responsibility, and giving back. In private, most of them treated kindness like a costume. My mother, Claire, had been Margaret's only daughter. She married my father, a public school teacher, against the family's wishes. After my mother died, I was still invited to major holidays, but I was never allowed to forget that I had grown up outside the family's golden circle. My uncle Richard, Margaret's oldest son, ran the family company. His wife, Vanessa, ran everything else: guest lists, social rankings, seating charts, and quiet punishments disguised as manners. Their daughter, Sloane, was 13 and already learning that cruelty received more attention than character. Their son, Parker, was turning 8 that summer. Parker was gentler than the rest of them, although in that house gentleness usually survived by staying silent. When Margaret collapsed, I was the only medical professional in the ballroom. I found her on the floor beside a table of untouched champagne. Her skin was gray. Her pulse was weak. Richard stood over her asking whether the photographers had left. Vanessa kept telling people not to panic because panic looked bad. I knelt, called for the automatic defibrillator, and took control. "Grandma, can you hear me?" I asked. Her eyes opened for half a second. "Elena," she whispered. That was all. At St. Catherine's Medical Center, the doctors found a dangerous heart rhythm and severe dehydration. She survived, but recovery was slow. Richard visited twice in the first week. Vanessa came once, stayed 11 minutes, and left after Margaret refused to pose for a family photograph. I came after my shifts. Some nights I sat beside her bed in scrubs, too tired to speak. I told her stories from the emergency room. I told her about a father sleeping in his car because his daughter had leukemia and he could not afford a hotel. I told her about a woman who delayed treatment because she had no transportation. I told her about nurses buying food for patients with their own money. One night, believing Margaret was asleep, I said, "Nobody should have to choose between being sick and losing everything." Her eyes remained closed, but her fingers moved against the blanket. At the time, I thought it was only a reflex. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. A hospital social worker named Dana stopped me near the nurses' station. She held a rejection letter from the Whitmore Family Relief Fund, a program that was supposed to help patients with temporary housing and transportation. "Did your family change the rules?" she asked. I read the letter. It said the fund had suspended emergency grants because of temporary liquidity restrictions. That made no sense. The foundation had millions in reserve. "I don't manage the foundation," I told her. "I know," Dana said. "But your name is the only Whitmore name I trust enough to ask." That sentence stayed with me. The next evening, I brought the letter to Margaret. She read it twice. Her face gave away nothing. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "From a social worker. Families are being turned away." Richard told the board the fund was fully active. "Then someone is lying." Margaret looked toward the hospital door, then lowered her voice. "Close it." I did. From the drawer beside her bed, She removed a small brass key taped beneath a box of tissues. "When I leave this hospital," she said, "Richard will try to move me into the estate's guest house. He will call it care. It will be control." I stared at her. "Grandma, what are you saying?" "I am saying my son has become impatient." She placed the key in my hand. "It opens the bottom drawer of my desk at home. Inside is a blue ledger. Bring it to Samuel Price. Do not tell anyone else." Samuel had been Margaret's attorney for almost 30 years. I had met him at funerals and weddings, always carrying the same leather folder and the same unreadable expression. "Why not ask him yourself?" I said. "Because Richard has started listening to my calls." The room suddenly felt colder. "Do you think he is stealing from you?" Margaret looked at the rejection letter. "I think he has already stolen from people who needed the money more." The next day, Richard announced that Margaret would recover at his home. He did not ask her. He told the doctor that the family had arranged private nursing care. Then he told me my visits should be limited because I made Margaret emotionally agitated. I knew what he was doing. He was building a story in which I was the unstable granddaughter and he was the responsible son. I also knew that openly fighting him would give him exactly what he wanted. So I smiled. "I understand," I said. Richard relaxed. "People like him often mistake silence for surrender." 3 nights later, I entered Margaret's city townhouse using the spare key she had hidden in an old recipe book. The house was dark. Margaret's desk stood in the library beneath a portrait of my mother. The brass key opened the bottom drawer. There was no blue ledger inside. The drawer was empty except for a strip of torn paper and a faint rectangle in the dust. Someone had reached it before me. I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. I froze. The house was supposed to be empty. Another creak followed. Then slow footsteps crossed the hall above me. I turned off my phone light and moved behind the library door. My heart beat so hard I could hear it. A shadow appeared on the staircase. It was Vanessa. She wore black leggings, a wool coat, and gloves. She carried a canvas bag against her chest. I watched through the narrow space beside the door as she crossed the foyer and left through the front entrance. I waited until her car disappeared before I moved. On the carpet near the desk, I found a small piece of blue paper. It had torn from the corner of whatever she had taken. Written across it was a number, 4.8 million. The next morning, I met Samuel in a coffee shop 2 towns away. When I showed him the paper, he did not look surprised. "Or Mrs. Whitmore suspected the ledger might be removed," he said. "You knew." "She asked me to wait until you came to me." "Why involve me?" "Because she needed to know whether you would protect her without knowing what you might receive in return." I felt anger rise. "So this was a test." "A precaution," he said. "Your grandmother has learned that money can make every act of love look suspicious." I stood to leave. Then Samuel slid a copy of the blue ledger across the table. Margaret had photographed every page months earlier. The ledger listed transfers from the family's charitable accounts into companies I did not recognize. There were consulting fees, property payments, travel expenses, and loans approved without full board votes. The total was more than $4 million. One company appeared again and again: Vantage Civic Strategies. The registered owner was Vanessa's brother. Another company had paid for renovations at Richard and Vanessa's mansion, although the house was legally owned by the trust. A third had purchased club memberships and a private aircraft share. The worst entry was a transfer from the Family Relief Fund 3 days before Dana received the rejection letter. $800,000 had been moved into a hospitality development project in Florida. The project did not exist. I thought of the father sleeping in his car. I thought of a child waiting for treatment while my relatives paid for imported stone around a swimming pool. "What happens now?" I asked. Samuel closed the ledger. "Would prove intent." For the next 5 months, I lived 2 lives. During the day, I worked 12-hour shifts, packed Mia's lunches, checked homework, and pretended not to notice when family invitations stopped arriving. At night, I helped Samuel organize documents. We compared board minutes, bank transfers, emails, and property invoices. A forensic accountant traced payments through 6 shell companies. Every trail led back to Richard or Vanessa. But proof of bad spending was not enough. Richard claimed Margaret had approved everything verbally before her hospitalization. Then, the mystery grew darker. Margaret's new private nurse called me from a block number. Her name was Tessa. She said Richard had ordered her to give Margaret a sedative every afternoon, even when Margaret was alert and refused it. He had also asked the family doctor to sign a statement saying Margaret lacked the mental capacity to manage her affairs. The doctor refused. A week later, Richard replaced him. Tessa secretly recorded one conversation. In it, Richard told Margaret that the company would collapse unless she signed temporary control of the trust over to him. Margaret answered clearly, "The company is healthy. Your accounts are not." Then Richard said something that removed any doubt. "If you will not sign willingly, we will establish that you cannot understand what you are refusing." When I heard the recording, my hands went cold. This was no longer greed. It was an attempt to erase an old woman while she was still alive. Samuel prepared an emergency petition. Margaret refused to file it. Not yet. She told us during a secret meeting at her cardiologist's office. She looked smaller than before, but her mind was sharp. If I stop Richard now, he will call it a misunderstanding. Vanessa will cry. The family will protect them because protecting the truth would threaten their comfort. What are you waiting for? I asked. For them to show everyone who they are. I did not understand until Parker's birthday invitation arrived. It was thick cream paper with gold lettering. The party would be held at the estate. There would be ponies, a magician, a dessert castle, and a children's table decorated like a royal banquet. At the bottom, Vanessa had written a personal note. "Please bring Mia," Parker insists. I did not trust it. For months, Vanessa had ignored my calls and told relatives I was manipulating Margaret for money. Now she wanted my daughter at her home. I called Margaret. "You need to come," she said. "Why?" "Because Richard believes I am announcing a trust change after the gifts." "Are you?" "Yes." "What change?" She paused. "The one they have earned." On the morning of the party, Mia chose Parker's gift herself. It was a dinosaur puzzle from a small science shop near our apartment. She spent part of her allowance on it and wrapped it in blue paper covered with silver stars. "Do you think he'll like it?" she asked. "I think he'll know you chose it with love." At the estate, luxury had been arranged like a stage set. White balloons covered the patio. A rented pony circled the garden. Staff carried trays of food no child would finish. The children received plastic crowns with their names printed in gold. Vanessa greeted us at the door with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Alana," she said. "You made it. You invited us." "Of course." She looked at my Navy Department store dress, then at Maya's simple yellow shoes. "We wanted everyone included." I heard the emphasis. "Everyone, not family." Mia ran to Parker and handed him the puzzle. He smiled, but Sloane saw the small box and laughed. "That's it," she said. "The other gifts are huge." Amia looked down. Parker started to answer, but Vanessa called him away for photographs. At lunch, the children's table had 12 decorated chairs. 11 had velvet name cards. Maya's name was missing. Beside the outdoor trash station stood a metal folding chair. It was stained with spilled lemonade. Vanessa pointed to it. "Mia can sit there," she said. I thought I had misheard her. "There are open seats at the table. Those are reserved for children who are not here." Vanessa's smile tightened. Several adults had begun watching. We made the arrangements according to family priority. Amia looked up at me. "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" Before I could answer, Sloane spoke loudly enough for the entire patio to hear. "Aunt Vanessa said nurses are helpers, not important people. Maybe helpers sit near the trash." A few teenagers laughed. One adult covered a smile with his glass. Richard looked directly at me and did nothing. That was the betrayal that hurt most, not Vanessa's cruelty. I expected that. It was the silence of people who had known me since childhood. People who had held Maya as a baby. People who attended hospital galas and praised compassion into microphones. They watched a 7-year-old child stand beside garbage, and they chose comfort over courage. I wanted to take Maya and leave. Then I noticed Margaret at the French doors. She stood with one hand on her cane. Samuel was behind her, carrying his leather folder. Margaret met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. The trap had closed. I pulled the folding chair away from the trash, wiped the seat with a napkin, and knelt beside Maya. You did nothing wrong, I told her. The chair is dirty. Their behavior is worse. Then Margaret's cane struck the stone patio once. The sound was not loud, but every conversation stopped. There is nothing to fix, she said. There is only what comes next. The cheerful music kept playing. A balloon arch moved in the wind. Somewhere inside the house, an ice machine hummed. No one spoke. Richard's face changed when he saw Samuel. Why is he here? Margaret did not look at him. I invited Mr. Price because today was supposed to be a family celebration. I intended to announce changes to the Whitmore Family Trust after Parker opened his gifts. Vanessa touched the diamond necklace Margaret had given her years earlier. What changes? Margaret looked around the patio. For years, I watched this family confuse wealth with worth. I watched expensive schools teach manners that disappeared the moment someone seemed less powerful. I watched charity galas become photographs, while the people serving the food were treated as invisible. Richard stepped closer. Mother, this is not the place. This became the place when a child was seated beside garbage, so her mother could be punished. Mia held my hand tighter. Samuel opened the folder. Margaret continued. The trust currently pays for homes, club memberships, allowances, aircraft access, and private investments belonging to this family. As of noon today, every discretionary allowance is suspended. The patio seemed to lose its air. One of my cousins whispered, "She can't do that." Samuel looked up. "She already has." Richard tried to remain calm. "The company depends on those distributions." "No," Margaret said. "Your lifestyle depends on them. The company can survive without private jets, vacation properties, and false consulting contracts." That last phrase struck like a match. Vanessa went pale. "What about this house?" she asked. Margaret looked at the white columns, the gardens, and the custom outdoor kitchen. "This house belongs to the trust. You gave it to us. I allowed you to live in it." Richard's face hardened. "You would remove us from our home over a childish misunderstanding." Margaret's eyes sharpened. "No. I am removing you because this was not a misunderstanding. It was a demonstration." She pointed toward the chair. "That chair showed me exactly what my money taught you." Several relatives looked away. Margaret turned toward them. "And none of you should feel relieved. Silence is participation when a child is being humiliated." My cousin Laura began to cry. "I should have said something." "Less," Margaret said. "You should have." Parker stepped away from the gift table with Maya's puzzle in his hands. He had torn off the paper. A glowing dinosaur skeleton covered the box. "I like it," he said. Sloane rolled her eyes. Parker looked at her. "Stop it, it's my birthday, and I like Maya's gift." Mia gave him a small smile. Then Margaret nodded to Samuel. Read the first provision. Samuel removed a document. Effective immediately, Richard Whitmore is removed as managing trustee and chief executive of Whitmore Holdings pending independent review. Richard laughed once, but it sounded empty. On what grounds? Samuel placed copies of the ledger, bank records, and invoices on the table. Self-dealing, misuse of charitable assets, falsified board approvals, and attempted coercion of the settlor. Beguest stepped backward as if the documents might explode. Vanessa stared at me. "You did this?" "No," I said. "You did. I only followed the money." Richard turned to Margaret. "She has poisoned you against your own son." Margaret reached into her handbag and removed a small recorder. Then Richard's own voice filled the patio. "If you will not sign willingly, we will establish that you cannot understand what you are refusing." His face collapsed. That was the twist Richard never expected. Margaret had not been helpless in the guest house. She had been collecting evidence. Tessa, the nurse he tried to use as a guard, had become a witness. The new doctor had reported the pressure to the medical board. Samuel had already secured court protection for Margaret and delivered the audit to the state attorney general's charity division that morning. The family was not watching an argument. They were watching the end of an investigation. Samuel continued, "All charitable assets will be transferred into the newly structured Whitmore Community Health Foundation. Mrs. Elena Callahan will serve as chair and primary steward under independent board supervision." A shocked murmur moved through the guests. The foundation will control 3 commercial properties, 2 medical investment funds, and an annual operating budget of $12 million. My breath caught. I had known Margaret planned to punish Richard. I had not known she planned to place the foundation in my hands. "Grandma, I can't accept that." "You can," she said. "And you will not be accepting it for yourself." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a plan for temporary housing near hospitals, transportation grants, nursing scholarships, emergency meals, and legal support for working families facing medical crises. At the top was a name, Thim Ahan Hayus. Maya blinked when I read it aloud. After me, Margaret smiled. After the girl who reminded this family what dignity looks like. But I didn't do anything. You stayed kind after people were unkind to you. That is harder than it sounds. Richard's anger returned. Elena is a nurse, not an executive. The old version of me might have lowered my eyes. I might have tried to make everyone comfortable. Then I looked at Maya. My daughter was watching me decide what I believed I deserved. So I stood straight. "I manage emergency teams during 12-hour shifts," I said. "I make decisions when seconds matter. I coordinate doctors, technicians, patients, and families while protecting lives. I will learn what I need to learn. Do not confuse compassion with incompetence." Margaret smiled. Samuel did too. Richard had no answer. Vanessa moved toward me. Her voice suddenly became soft. "Elena, I'm sorry Mia's feelings were hurt." Margaret tapped her cane. "That is not an apology." Vanessa flinched. "An apology names the action," Margaret said. "It accepts responsibility. It does not hide behind someone else's feelings." For the first time that day, Vanessa looked directly at my daughter. "I am sorry I told you to sit beside the trash," she said. "There were empty seats, and I knew it. I wanted to make your mother feel small, and I used you to do it. That was wrong." Mia leaned against me. "Why did you want Mommy to feel small?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no polished answer came. Finally, she looked down. "Because your mother is good at something money cannot buy. People trust her. Margaret loves her. I was jealous." "Did being mean make you important?" Mia asked. Vanessa shook her head. "No." "Then you should not do it again." The Vanessa gave a broken laugh through tears. "You are right." Margaret turned to Sloane. "Your turn." The Sloane folded her arms. "I was joking." Maya's face changed. Margaret's voice remained calm. "Try again." Sloane's lower lip trembled. "I called you poor. I said your mom was lowly. I'm sorry." Mia studied her. "Do you mean it?" Sloane looked around at the adults, the documents, and the mansion that no longer belonged to her parents. "I don't know," she whispered. Her honesty surprised me. I crouched beside her. "Then don't promise what you don't feel yet. You can decide what you do next." "How?" "Start by cleaning the chair." For a moment, she did not move. Then Parker set down the dinosaur puzzle and brought paper towels from the kitchen. Sloane followed him. Together, they cleaned the lemonade from the metal seat and carried the chair away from the trash. Mia watched them. Then, she broke her cupcake in half and offered one piece to Parker. The children reached kindness before the adults did. Margaret asked the caterer to move the unopened food into the kitchen. "The party is over," Vanessa said, horrified. "No," Margaret replied. "The performance is over." She told Parker he could keep 5 friends. The rest of the afternoon would be spent packing the untouched food into meal boxes for a women's shelter in Baltimore. The ponies went home. The magician was cancelled. The plastic crowns came off, At first, the children complained. Then I showed them how much food had been wasted. 38 boxes? I said when we finished. Parker's eyes widened. That's dinner for 38 people. Wes. Sloane placed fruit cups into a box. Do people really need this here? Everywhere, I said. Mia drew butterflies on small cards and wrote 2 words on each one. You matter. By sunset, the dessert castle was gone. In its place stood rows of meals ready for delivery. That should have been the end of the story. It was only the beginning of the revenge. 3 weeks later, Richard and Vanessa moved out of the estate. They were given 6 months in a modest rental owned by neither the trust nor the company. Richard lost his executive position. The state opened a civil case over the charitable transfers, and the company sued to recover the money paid to the shell businesses. Vanessa's brother returned most of the funds rather than face trial. The Florida project vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Richard told anyone who would listen that I had stolen his inheritance. I never answered him publicly. Instead, I let the numbers answer. The recovered money paid for hospital transportation vans, emergency hotel rooms, and the first year of construction on the Maya Callahan house. Every dollar they had tried to turn into luxury came back as something useful. That was my revenge. Not watching Richard lose a house. Watching the house he lost become 100 safe rooms for people he had ignored. I accepted the foundation role under 3 conditions. I would continue limited nursing shifts. The board would include nurses, social workers, patients, and community representatives. And Mia's name would never be used for publicity without her permission. Margaret agreed immediately. The rest of the family received new trust conditions. Anyone requesting support had to work, submit real budgets, and complete community service without photographers or social media. Some relatives walked away, others changed. Laura began volunteering at the hospital family desk. One cousin sold his second sports car and funded a transportation van. Another came to my apartment, apologized for staying silent, and did not ask me to forgive him. Vanessa began counseling. I did not praise her for it. Doing the necessary work is not a medal, it is a debt. Sloane changed slowly. Real change usually does. She still had sharp moments, but she stopped treating cruelty like entertainment. Parker joined a youth service club and kept the dinosaur puzzle on his bedroom wall until the new center opened. 1 year after the party, the first Mia Callahan house opened across from St. Catherine's Medical Center. It had 20 family rooms, a shared kitchen, free laundry, a children's reading room, and a small garden. The ribbon was blue because that was Maya's favorite color. There were no champagne towers and no gold place cards. Margaret stood beside me in a navy coat. She leaned more heavily on her cane, but her eyes were clear. Richard did not attend. Vanessa stood at the back with Sloane and Parker. Reporters expected me to speak first. Before I reached the microphone, Mia tugged my sleeve. Can I say something? I looked at the crowd, then at my daughter, Wes. She stepped forward holding one of her butterfly cards. When I was at a party, she said, someone made me sit beside the trash because they thought my mom was not important. The crowd became still. But my mom helps people when they are scared. That is important. My eyes filled. Mia unfolded the card. My great-grandmother says money can build a house, but kindness makes people feel safe inside it. So this house is for families who need somewhere safe. The applause began softly and grew until it filled the street. Later, after the cameras left, the first family arrived. A father carried a sleeping toddler. His wife was in intensive care. He had slept in his car for 4 nights because he could not afford a hotel. I showed him to a clean room. There is food in the kitchen, I said. Laundry is downstairs. You can stay as long as the hospital social worker approves. He looked around. How much does this cost? Nothing. His shoulders collapsed with relief. Mia stood in the doorway holding a welcome bag. Inside were a toothbrush, a coloring book, a stuffed dinosaur, and a butterfly card. The man read the 2 words. You matter. He covered his face and cried. Mia whispered, good crying. I put my arm around her. Yes, sweetheart. Good crying. That evening, Parker brought the completed dinosaur puzzle in a frame. He and Sloane hung it in the children's reading room. At the bottom, Sloane had added a handwritten sign. Tici bist gefs erftiosasoundiovi. Vanessa found me near the garden door. I know one apology does not repair everything, she said. No, I replied. It does not. I'm trying to teach Sloane differently. Then let her see you live differently. Vanessa nodded. I did not give her easy forgiveness. I gave her a path forward, with boundaries. Margaret joined me after sunset. Through the glass doors, families ate together in the shared kitchen. Richard still says you stole his inheritance, she told me. I didn't steal anything. I know. She looked at the warm rooms and the people inside them. You turned it into something useful. In the garden, Mia and Parker ran between the flower beds. Sloane helped a younger child choose a book. No one had assigned seats. No velvet cards marked the important people. Everyone sat together. A year earlier, the Whitmore fortune had been measured in buildings, investments, and numbers on legal documents. Now I measured it in warm beds, shared meals, safe rooms, and frightened families who no longer faced their hardest nights alone. The Whitmore name did not disappear. It finally learned what it was worth. And Mia never forgot the chair beside the trash. Neither did I, because that chair became more than the place where my family tried to shame us. It became the last seat their money ever chose for my daughter. And the first thing I turned against them. They wanted us beside the garbage. So I took everything they had thrown away and built a home with it.